Many thanks for choosing us. We are your home of independent, fearless and credible journalism. Now let's take you to Parliament, where the Finance Minister, Dr. Amin Adams, has once again absented himself from Parliament for the mini-budget presentation. The minority believes this is deliberate attempt by the government to delay the budget and undermine the incoming administration next year. Parliament has reconvened to consider a number of government businesses before it rises. Let's cross over to Parliament now to speak to my colleague, Kweku Asante, who's been there and been following what's been happening in Parliament. Kweku, please tell us and bring us updates on why he absented himself again.
So, MFR, this is the second day running that the Finance Minister, Dr. Mohamed Amin Adam, has absented himself from the House, like you said, which has meant that the very important mini-budget has still not been dealt with. It is a package of about 68.1 billion Ghana cedis, which is expected to cater for January, February, and March of salaries of public sector workers to ensure that government is able to function effectively between January and March of next year, before John Dramani Mahama, who has been elected president, will appoint a new finance minister who will then present a substantive 2025 budget for the government of Ghana. And so the finance minister, Dr. Mohamed Amin Adam, had given indication that yesterday, that was Monday, when Parliament resumed after that long break, that particular business would have come to the floor. That did not come. In fact, at the time, the Minister for Parliamentary Affairs and former Majority Leader, Sir Chairman Sabonsu, did give some indication that this document will perhaps be presented today because of some final tweakings that were being made on that. Today as well, when Parliament sat and they were expecting to do this business, they were expecting that the Minister will present this document. The Minister was also nowhere to be found. In fact, at the time, the Majority Leader was also absent. There was also no Minister on the floor who could have even purported to have acted in the stead of the Finance Minister when it comes to this matter. So yet again, for the second day running, that crucial 2025 mini-budget has still not been presented, and Ghana risks a government shutdown because Parliament, as we know, is programmed to actually go on break on Friday. If they go on Friday, they will come back in January after Christmas and after the New Year festivities, and that will mean that between 1st and the 1st January and March, there will be a government shutdown if some exigent issues are not dealt with to be able to pave this out of the way. It will mean, for instance, that even the presidential inauguration may not come off because that is a state-funded event which must be taken care of by the state. It must be paid through the state coffers, through the 2025 mini-budget, which still hasn't been approved, MFA.
I know that you've been following parliamentary proceedings for a while now. And I quite understand that it's the sitting government, really, that would have to put a budget together to inaugurate the next government. And I like to think that this budget will be part of this mini-budget. Correct me if I'm wrong. How then do they want to do the inaugural ceremony?
Well, yes, this is something that actually did come up on the floor because of how crucial that mini-budget is. All state proceedings that take source from the consolidated fund will not happen between 1st January up until the time where there's been able to be a presentation of a budget. It will mean that even Parliament itself, once it goes on break and is scheduled to resume in January, cannot even sit because every amount of money that was approved for it to spend in 2024 would have been expended, and that particular amount, that budget line, would have been exceeded. And then Parliament itself would have no funds to be able to sit on the 3rd or 2nd or be able to do any other business in terms of how Parliament is supposed to transact, be able to elect a new Speaker of Parliament who will in turn swear in a number of all the members of Parliament having been elected. And so this is of such huge importance and the consequences are dire. And that is why the former Majority Leader and Minister for Parliamentary Affairs has been giving assurances that there are certain tweakings that are being done to the budget. And then once it's ready, the finance minister will bring it. Already the NDC, like you said at the top of the hour, are alleging that it may be a grand scheme by the government to try and delay this so that the government of John Dramani Mahama will not have money to actually kick off and do what it intends to do when it is sworn in, if it is actually sworn in at all, because there will be no money on the 7th of January to be able to do all of these things. And so it's a big conversation ongoing on the floor of Parliament. The Speaker of Parliament himself giving some directions on this matter to ensure that the mini-budget do come, and then the specific business that needs to be done will be done on it When it comes 68.1 billion, it will be referred to the budget committee. It should be dealt with before it is consequently brought back to the floor for a general approval. And so far, with just 3 days for the House to go on break, that business has still not come, MFA.
Well, I also know that any time there's a change of government, you're not surprised to see certain things like this happen in Parliament. What's the most or what's the worst that can happen, and what could be the way out for the incoming government if this mini budget is not approved? What can they do to mitigate?
Well, this is a bit of a novelty because in terms of other times, not much has happened in terms of some of these things. The mini budgets have almost always been dealt with as soon as, in fact, mostly before the election. But this time around, because of the conflict having to do with the declaration of some seats as vacant, Parliament has not sat for nearly 2 months, and that this business ordinarily was expected to be done in November. And in the previous election years, they've always been done in November so that these matters will be dealt with before the specifics of these issues will be dealt with. So in November, that was when this was supposed to be done. There was a conflict. This did not happen. And now Parliament is back. And 2 days it has been sitting. It has not been able to do any real business. And this has still not been done. There's a certain sense of optimism in Parliament that this will be done, even if it's the last minute. But there are real fears that the government will grind to a halt if this is not done. Public sector salaries will not be paid, and a host of other national events, which takes its source from the consolidated fund, will all struggle to come to life.
Well, finally, before I let you go, is there any headway concerning some of the tax waivers that the sitting government has been asking for?
Can you come again?
Is there any headway for some of the tax waivers that the sitting government has been asking for in Parliament? Have they made any progress at all?
Well, as regards the tax waivers, there's still a deadlock. The minority in Parliament have said that they are not going to allow it to go through. They believe that these are commitments that will put a dent in the future government's finances, and so they do not want this to happen. In fact, on the floor today, Carlos Ahinkrai, former Deputy Minister for Trade and Industry, did say that if the NDC wanted a mini budget to come, then they should agree to cooperate with government to actually pass those tax waivers. If they do so, the mini budget will come, and that argument was flatly shut down by the NDC in the House. They've insisted that this is not something that they are going to support because they believe that the future NDC government, John Dramani Mahama, should come in 2025, look at those figures, and if he so wishes to grant tax waivers, he should be able to do so. And the lame duck, Nana Dankwa government, which is just about 3 weeks from its tenure being ended on the 7th of January, should not be saddling John Dramani Mahama with more debts.
Thank you so much, Kweku Asante. And Kweku Asante is our man on ground at Parliament, and he definitely will keep his eye on everything that's happening in Parliament, and we'll bring it to you in our subsequent bulletin. But moving on, President-elect John Mahama has announced plans to soon inaugurate a committee dedicated to ensuring he achieves his 120-day social contract with the people of Ghana. This contract includes the Operation Recover or Loot, what you know as ORAL, initiative, which aims to combat corruption by investigating allegations, recovering misappropriated state resources, and prosecuting offenders. Speaking during a courtesy call from members of the Apostolic Fathers, he stressed his administration's commitment to enhancing accountability. We'll hear from John Mahama in a moment, but first, founder of the Action Chapel International and member of the Apostolic Fathers, Archbishop Nicholas Duncan Williams, urges Ghanaians to manage their expectations and rather pray for the president-elect.
Most times when new president and government comes, there's a very high expectations that high expectation that everybody has, and so we know that expectations have to be managed because you are a vessel that has come. I mean, these things that people say you've come to save, you've come to rescue, they should be very careful of that because you are a vessel in the hands of God. So they should stop saying that and pray for you rather that God can use you to execute the mandate that the people of this country have entrusted into your hands. I know it's a difficult challenge. During the time you were in opposition, we were talking one time, and you were saying that Mama Lodina, you and her were talking, and it was like what at all are you doing? You know, why are you standing for election with the kind of situation that we are facing and things are going through? But I think that was when you realize that it's a call and it's a mandate of God that you have to fulfill. And I remember that when we talked 2016, I had mentioned to you what I felt prophetically, that you have to leave, and at the right time you come again. And 2020, we met again with Honorable Elvis in my office, and I said to you that, Mr. President, you are not coming now, you will come after 2020. So when 2020 ended, I was very confident, irrespective of whatever anybody said, that it was your time to come back to fulfill mandate and to finish your unfinished business. And I believe that by God's grace, who preserved you, kept you alive, and you didn't die, and you lived, and you are still here, will guide you, preserve you, and give you what it takes to move this nation according to his mandate to where he wants to take this nation to. And we want to pray and believe that at your term of office, that the narrative, the negative narratives that have plagued governments of this country will change during your term in office, and that we will see a new and a beautiful Ghana by the grace of God.
We can now hear from John Mahama on his plans to soon inaugurate a committee dedicated to implementing his 120-day social contract with the people of Ghana.
We carefully selected the things that we thought were achievable in 120 days. And so we're going to work diligently to make sure that at the end of 120 days, we're able to put a check on each of them. And so I'll soon inaugurate a committee that is focused on achieving the 120-day plan. And under it, we have Operation Recover All the Loot. I'm happy you have expressed your support for it, because I do think that people must be held accountable. If you agree to accept the public trust, then you must account to the people who gave you that public trust. And so if we do this, it will make people think twice before they accept public office. I mean, if you live in your own private business, you can run it anyhow you want, that's your business. But if you come and the taxpayer puts, you're put in an office which is paid with taxpayers' money, you must be prepared to account to the people for the trust that they have put in you. And so we want to raise accountability to another level. It's in our constitution that we shall uphold the principles of probity and accountability. And so it's a constitutional obligation for us to do that. As I said yesterday, this probably is our last chance to get things right, because if this administration does not lift the level, then, I mean, people really would look at other means of, being able to achieve what they think would make life better for them. And as I said, we're not immune to what is happening in other countries in our sub-region. And so we need to work as quickly as possible to bring back trust in our democracy. We know that democracy is the best system because it affords you the opportunity to do some of the things that have happened, hold elections, change governments. In unconstitutional governments, whether you like it or not, you live in it, and you cannot make a change if even things are not going very well. So there's a lot of work to do, and I think that in the space of agriculture and agribusiness, agro-processing, that's a new area the churches must begin to look at. Because
John Mahama also promised to expand partnership with religious missions and churches in the health and education sectors. He criticized the outgoing government for constructing some of its Agenda 111 hospitals in areas where churches already had established medical facilities.
There are issues that we would want to work with the church with. The church is known for its role in education and healthcare for a very long time. And indeed, in our previous time in office, we had come to the stage where we wanted to see an expanded role of the church, both in education and healthcare. And so one of the things I had indicated was that, we needed to have a change of policy in terms of building public hospitals, and that in communities where you had a good operating mission hospital, rather than go and build another hospital to compete with it, we should spend the resources expanding the mission hospital so that it can provide the same quality health care that we expect. Unfortunately, in rolling out this Agenda 111, many places where there are mission hospitals, government has gone to plant a new hospital. And already the Ghana Health Service is overburdened. They are not able to manage the hospitals well because we don't have professional health administrators managing those hospitals. You know, you have clinical services, clinicians, and you have hospital administration and management. These are two completely separate fields. The fact that the person is a good surgeon doesn't mean he'll be a good manager of the hospital. So if you look at the two hospitals, the Christian Health Association of Ghana Hospitals and the Mission Hospitals, they are better run than the Ghana Health Service hospitals. But all of a sudden, we have another 80-something hospitals for Ghana Health Service to manage. I mean, what do you expect is going to happen? Government will put all the equipment, then gradually the equipment run down, X-ray is broken, MRI is broken down, this is broken down, and then people still have to go to the private sector to go and get these same services. So we need a change of mindsets completely. It's the same with schools. I mean, everybody is clamoring to go to the mission schools now because they are better managed. Everybody wants to go to Holy Child, Wesley Girls, and all those other schools. And so how we expand our partnership with the missions in terms of management of some of these facilities, instead of being in competition with the church and missions, we should rather be partnering with them, sometimes even handing over public schools to them to manage, so that they'll be managed better, handing over public hospitals to them to manage so that they'll be managed better and reduce the burden that we have on their health services.
Also, in a meeting with the U.S. ambassador to Ghana, the president-elect said the Millennium Challenge Compact, which you know as MCC, has helped in strengthening Ghana's electricity generation capabilities and expressed optimism about revisiting unfinished MCC projects.
Relations are historic between our two countries, but I also want to thank you for the warm relation we've had personally since you became ambassador. Your doors have been opened. We have a very good communication channel. And so it's my hope that we'll be able to continue on that track. I want to thank you for the meeting we had with the SD. It gave us a lot of insights and made us understand the level of cooperation between our two countries. And as I expressed to you, we're willing to continue and deepen those relations. Yeah, it's critical even more now than before because of what Ghana is going through, both in terms of the economy and finances, but more importantly even because of the energy sector, and knowing the comparative advantage and technology and knowledge that the U.S. has. We want to work closely to see how we can resolve some of the issues in that sector. Of course, we worked on the MCC together, and it's made Ghana's electricity generation sector more resilient than it was before the MCC. As I said, it was just the final part that we couldn't complete together. Luckily, we had the opportunity to discuss with the MCC when we went there to see how we could wrap up that part of our cooperation. And so I think that it's something we'll look to start talking about as soon as we can.
You're watching The Pulse, so we'll be back shortly. Welcome back to The Pulse. Now, with Ghana's population projected to reach 52 million by 2050, coupled with a growing middle class driving food demand, a productive agricultural sector is essential to meet growing demand. Now, currently, with a population of about 33 million, Ghana spends billions of cedis on food imports, while its agricultural sector faces significant challenges. This includes climate change, environmental degradation, pests and diseases, inadequate agro-processing, infrastructure. Now, limited access to credit and import, among others. So this afternoon on The Pulse, we are exploring the state of agriculture and help you appreciate what the incoming administration stands to inherit. What do stakeholders expect the Mahama administration to do differently? Well, before I introduce my guest, let's turn to Kofi J, my favorite man, from the research desk who has been investigating the sector. Kofi, what have you been finding? What have you been up to with the numbers?
So if you look at this on the smart wall, you can see the number of promises that both the NPP and the NDC made on the agri sector, very important sector if you're talking about the economy. It's one big subsector under the economy that when you see it falling, almost everything else will fall under the economy, because we human beings drive the economy and we need food, or we need agriculture to survive. Just like I always say, the blue side currently is redundant because we were not able to have them in power. But those who have power are actually the green guys. So we will analyze the 96 promises that were actually made by President-elect Mahama in his 2024 Mahama. We were, manifesto. We were able to count 96 promises that were made on agri. Now, first of all, I want us to start with food security. Why? Because that is very important. If you want to gauge the health of the agri sector, you have to gauge it from the standpoint of food security. He is saying, John Dramani Mahama saying that they are going to introduce what they call the Feed Ghana project. What is it going to do? It is going to increase or help increase the production of certain staples, right? We are talking about maize, rice, soya beans, and other grains that the country consumes. And we all know what happened when we had the drought somewhere about 2 months ago, and the Agri Ministry had to step in. Very, very important. So they are going to introduce what they call, Feed Ghana project. So the Feed Ghana project is going to, focus on the grains that you actually see on the smart wall. Now, moving beyond that, we need to paint a picture of where we are as a country when it comes to food security. So we decided to pull this, chart on the smart wall for people to understand that if food security were to be an examination, right, and you are getting a score between 0 to 100, where 0 is the lowest, 100 is the highest mark. This is currently our score in 2022, and now we are slightly above average. 52.6.
Is that a red line?
Well, that's a red line for me, because we are talking about food, and the countries that are food dependent, food independent or are food secure, they are all hovering around the 65, the 70, and the 80s. So if we want to be in that same domain, then we should be aiming to go above, 60, 70. So scoring 52.6 to me is not really, a very good mark at the moment, because we are talking about food. It means that the slightest, hit, or the slightest shock, we could be in a very difficult position. Now, let's track this right from 2012 to 2024, 2022, the last time that the Food Security Index was actually introduced, and see the trend of our performance. Have we been there before? Have we been beyond the 60 marks before? The answer is simply no. If we look at this trend, we've been moving from somewhere 43.1%, somewhere 2012. Mahama left office, we were around 47.8. So you could say that we've had some improvement. The improvement actually started, starting from 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. And all of these periods, I will show you the food inflation. And you see that even general inflation was single digits. And you can see the very upward trajectory until we got the 62.8. This was a time that I will say that Ghana was in a very comfortable position in terms of food security. But we also saw that I was talking about shocks that, if you're hovering around 50s and 58s and a little above 50, when there's a slight shock, you see the effects. And so right after COVID, you see the effect there. Why? Because we are import-dependent country, and this is actually being evident looking at the graph that you see on the screen. This tells you that slight shock actually took us away from 62.8% as our score to 52, our current 52.6. So we've been there before, talking about being above 60. That was 2019. But that small shock or that significant shock in 2020 when COVID struck, we all saw our smoothness level. Why? Because we are import-dependent country. Now, for me, I mean, irrigation is very important because if you look at the northern belt of the country, it is supposed to be a significant part of the country where majority or significant component of our food, especially the grains, come from. And they've been, struggling with weather conditions, rainfall, and what have you. So if you're talking about dams, this is one place that you actually need to focus on. We all know about the famous or the infamous, one village, one dam, right? Yes. We didn't really see the effects of that, where a number of the dams actually got dried after they were introduced. But John Dramani Mahama says that, look, when they come to office, and in fact, they've been given the mandates, what are they going to do? They said that they are going to double the cultivatable land, under irrigation, rehabilitate key irrigation projects. And they talk about the infamous Poultry Dam, right? Where, according to the Auditor General, about some $12 million was actually paid and no work has been done. Mahama is also going to focus on Poultry. We all don't know what he's going to do about it. But the other two dams that they will do, the Temni and then the Nasia Nabogo Dam also, all of these are actually in the northern part of the country. That tells you that that aspect of the country when it comes to the production of food, especially grains, that side is very important. And unfortunately, they struggle with weather conditions a lot. So introducing irrigation and dams, very important on that side as well. Now, I know Nana Obuadie and then Edward will be looking at this sector and saying that this is a sector that has actually not performed really, really well in the last 3 years, the cocoa sector. And why is this so? We all know the devastating effects of illegal mining, where farmlands are now being turned to, illegal mining sites. And even cocoa, we are producing below average. I don't remember the last time we were able to produce 800,000 tons. It's been a very, very long time. And John Dramani Mahama says they're going to focus on the cocoa sector as well. Now, support for agro-processing, very important. Why? Because definitely we always have a challenge with food storage and processing. Sometimes you go to the market and tomatoes or plantain or yam is in abundance, but have we spoke about processing? Very important. What's he going to do? He's going to establish agro-industrial zones, mini processing plants for crops like cassava and rice, and also reviving factories like the Commander Sugar Factory. So if you're watching us and you are actually thinking about the Commander Sugar Factory, John Dramani Mahama is actually focusing on the Commander Sugar Factory as well. Now we have mechanization and technology also important, the livestock development. But I want us to look at this trend. I mean, this chart on the screen. For me, this is one of the reasons why Ghanaians actually voted out the current government, because food inflation, when Mahama was leaving office, was 8.7, single digits. Now, the Akufo-Addo administration was able to maintain it 2017, 2018, 2019. Right from 2020 when COVID struck, we all saw the upward trajectory, the stratospheric rise in food inflation. And in 2023, we are talking about an average of 49%. 49% food inflation rate is very high. Now, cocoa for me is also important. Let's look at our production. I was talking about the production of cocoa in the last 4 years, and this is actually evident. The last time we produced somewhere 1 million was 2010, 2011, and in the 2020-2021 season, we produced about 1 million metric tons. Now we are talking about below 500,000 metric tons. What are we going to do to bring this back? Cocoa farmers possibly are watching us, and they are asking themselves, what is the Mahama administration going to do about the farm gate price? This is evident if you compare the NPP and the NDC in 8 years, 2009 to 2016 and 2017 to 2024, how much have they all increased cocoa price cumulatively? NPP, we are talking about 227.9%, NDC 183.7%. All very good, but what's Mahama going to do? Another important aspect is how much are we going to give to the agri sector in terms of your budgetary allocation. Evidence is here. If you look at it, the NDC from 2000 to 2016 increased their agri budget by 476%, MPP 502%. So, I mean, you are watching, the agri sector is very important. We have a new president-elect, and he's really going to focus on this because why? when the agri sector is suffering, the city will suffer. Why? Because we are an import-dependent country. And our import bill this year, we estimate could reach somewhere $18 billion. And food imports is a significant component of that.
Kofi is just amazing. Kofi, thank you so much for showing us the numbers and giving us the true picture. Thank you very much. Well, it's a good time to bring in players in this sector. And let me just introduce, joining us via Zoom, but maybe in the studio first. Joining us in the conversation in the studio is Nana Obuadie, President of the Concerned Farmers Association, to my far left. Thank you, Nana, for joining us. And also Edward Kare, who is, I've always been rehearsing the name, Karewe. Yes. I got it right.
Go again.
Edward Karewe.
Yes, you have it.
Thank you so much for joining us. And he is a former General Secretary of the General Agriculture Workers Union. Also joining us via Zoom is Mr. Fred Kukubo, who is a major commercial rice farmer, and also Michael Nyako Ampem is a former president of the Greater Accra Poultry Farmers Association. And even more importantly, joining us today is Dr. Peter Boama Otokuno, who speaks for the incoming government on agriculture. And you also know him as an agricultural economist who will be able to give us some assurances and some certainties on what the incoming government will be doing. But let me start in the studio. Nana, thank you for joining us. What would you say is the general state of the agri sector in Ghana?
Thank you very much, and then good evening to your viewers, and then the concerned farmers, and then Ghana National Association of Farmers and Fishermen, and then peasant farmers as well. With the state of Ghana's agriculture, when you ask me this, I think it is, I would say that it has collapsed. It has collapsed. It is not, yes, it is not in a good stage, because my brother here is from the northern sector, and then we are in the drying season now. Go to the northern sector and see whether they even have these dams that they claim that they constructed to water their crops or what. Everything that I'm talking about now, it is not feasible. You will not see it. So the state of Ghana's agriculture, if it's like a man, I would say that maybe it cannot wake up. You know, yeah, Ghana's agriculture at the moment, it is nowhere to be found, because we import everything that we eat in this country. Right. And at the end of the day, the Ministry of Agri, they are running business on their own. They are not doing the agri with we, the farmers. Okay. And it is very sad as a country like Ghana, agricultural country that we boast of. A ministry that they are players that they are supposed to, their policy makers are now taking the job of we, the FBOs.
We'll come to the nuances of how you'd want the ministry to do business or even get into agriculture with you, so that you break it down for us. But Mr. Karewe, you have been the General Secretary for the General Agricultural Workers Union for a while. And during the years that you were the General Secretary, what would you say has been the main, if you agree to Nana saying that, do you first of all agree that the agriculture sector is still standing, or is collapsed, or is at the verge of collapsing, or it is looking like it is collapsed? What's your state on it, and what has been some of the things that your members as a union have been saying has contributed to it?
Well, thanks very much for this great opportunity. Greetings to the farmers and to all those who are watching us. It's an honor to be on this platform. Well, I think Nana said it right. Ghana's agricultural economy is terribly sick. It needs an emergency treatment. It needs surgery. It needs multiples of treatment, you know, and we could at best say that Ghana's agriculture is in the state of ICU. I see. Yeah, intensive care unit now.
I see.
Yeah.
Right, let's go on Zoom and get the reaction as well from the commercial rice farmer, Mr. Kukubo. So I know that the Volta region over the years contributed to rice production in Ghana. Yesterday in Parliament, Honorable Okujeto Ablakwa, for MP for the Northern constituency, mentioned that the Aveime rice factory is collapsed, and they were hoping that the one district, one factory would have been extended over there. Before I go to Dr. Peter Otokuno, let me come to you. What is the state? Let's break it down to the rice industry in Ghana. What is the state of the locally manufactured rice? What's the state of it?
Good afternoon to your listeners and viewers online. well, as we already know, rice is a major staple for this country. And clearly every home, every industry, restaurant or gathering or occasion, you find people eating rice. There's no menu you have in an occasion that you wouldn't have rice there also as one of the food being served. And in Ghana, the major producing rice regions include Poultry, that is Southern Belt. If you take, the Northern Belt away from it. And as we speak, or if you want to look at data from the side of importation and then the local production, clearly you realize that the local production of rice has been, it's been really a challenge comparing it to the level of imports. Some 5 years ago, or let me say 4 years ago, in the current administration, then the ambition or the agenda was to significantly reduce the importation of rice, by some maybe by some 30% more. Okay, that means that if by then the percentage rate for importation is, let's say, around 40%, the ambition was to actually either completely clear it and boost local production so that we can have businesses within the rice value chain. But that has not been the case as we speak. As we speak, farmers are still struggling down south here in the Poultry region and even up north with access to major infrastructures major infrastructures and machineries, such as access to tractors. It was shocking to know that accessibility to tractor is still a big challenge within the general agricultural space, including rice. And then one of the equipment, such as combined harvesters. If you are looking at producing at scale, clearly you need combined harvesters, to be able to harvest the rice in that commercial nature or that volumes if you are working with multiple smallholder farmers. So access to equipment such as the tractors or the machineries is still a big challenge. And there hasn't been much effort, so to speak. If we have to call a spade, towards revamping that sector with respect to access to machineries and also, access to viable seeds, for instance. So I think the hope of farmers across the country, as far as the rice value chain is concerned, has largely been on the introduction of the flagship project, that is the PFJ 1 and 2. But the data that is before us now also clearly tells me that the PFJ 1 is nothing quite good to write home about. It was a big failure. And then the hope for PFJ 2, with the hope that it will rebound and then revitalize the sector, I think the inception stages of PFJ 2 has also been quite disappointing, if we must say. In recent times, we've seen or come across a lot of
PFJ, by this you mean planting for food and jobs?
Yes, madam. Yes, MFR. That's planting for food and jobs. Okay. It's been the major hope by farmers for the current administration, but it has not lived up to expectation because we have observed, those on the ground, indeed, they will come to your project site. Most of the farmers were registered, but farmers never really received the inputs to boost agricultural production. Okay. So, and there's been a lot of hoarding. And we've seen videos, we've seen pictures of that. Our system, our company, for instance, was registered, but to date, not a single fertilizer has been made available. If I'm speaking to myself, as in assessing the PFG and its benefits for the general farm population. So it's not really been very good, I must say. And no wonder, in just a few weeks ago, we had to import maize and rice because of the severe drought we experienced. If PFJ 1 and PFJ 2 were anything good to go by, then we should have enough food in our buffer stock, so that in times of crisis like this, then the country can fall on the buffer stock rather than importing some of these major staples that we cannot do without. So there are major issues and challenges within the sector.
Which you've nicely outlined them. You've nicely outlined them for me. Let's go to the poultry industry as well and speak to Michael Nyako Ampim. He's the former president of the Greater Accra Poultry Farmers Association. Would you associate with some of the challenges that Mr. Kubo has just shared in the rice industry, or what's particularly the challenge in the poultry industry? If you can unmute for us, please. Hi, Mr. Ampim. If you can unmute and if you can hear me.
Okay, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. We associate with all the issues that have been raised. To be honest with you, we deal in maize a lot, and we deal in soya as well. And once the prices of soya and maize go up, it means that our cost of production is generally going up. And usually between 2016 and 2020, it was fine. I mean, the market was fine until 2020 when we had some droughts in the West African region, and we didn't control our exports and all of that. So we had a shortage in the country. Again, the foreign exchange situation has not helped us because some of the things that we produce are imported, and we need a foreign exchange to be able to get those things into the country. And once the exchange rate moved from 6 cities to 17 cities or 18 cities, it meant that our cost of production went up significantly, and by that, a lot of people were put out of business. So it's been quite difficult an industry to operate in. We are making do with what we have, but it's not been easy. Again, the maize situation, if we do not have maize in large quantities, we are going to end up competing with the humans who eat the maize, because the chicken eat maize and then the humans also eat maize. How do you balance the two in the situation?
Yeah.
And so when the two compete for the same product, it means that the prices of the end product is going to go up.
Yes.
And with the shortage that we encounter in the drought and all the things that have been listed, I don't want to belabor that we have been listed, we realize that our cost of production has really, really gone up. So we are in dire straits, and we believe that if something is not done, even the number of farmers that have gone out of the business will even be more. Mr. Carraway and knows some of these things. I've worked with him on some of these things for quite some time.
Yeah.
And he knows what I'm talking about. It's been very, very stressful. But as we go along, we'll enumerate some of the things that we do. That needs to be done by the Mahama government.
It would be a perfect time to do that. And Dr. Otokuno, sorry for calling you Miss there. Doctor, I'll come back to you, but let me come back to the studio and engage my guest here, because we want to assemble all the challenges and then you can give us some assurances. Mr. Ampim, when I come back to you again, I'd like to know the state of soybeans, because about 3 years ago, there was some shortage of soybeans in the system and it was due to black market. And I want you to address that for me if the situation is quite better now. But Mr. Carraway, you, because you're the General Secretary for the farmers, it seems to see the challenge is a cat cross. And the challenge that Nana Obuade would share will be the same thing that Mr. Kukubo would also share. And I'll come to you for the details of the Ministry of Agriculture challenges. But within the farmers themselves, and as Mr. Kukubo has been saying, the planting for food and jobs, and all of the things that you have said are the challenges, what have they been saying are the expectations of the incoming government?
Well, farmers they've seen the new government coming in and with a policy as a savior for them. I mean, it gives them a hope that things will change from what they already have. And you can see the narrative about the challenges facing farmers. So they've seen the incoming government coming in as a hope. But you see, if you have to address the agricultural sector, we think that the agricultural sector is just like a homogeneous, sector. It is not. Very diverse, and then you need to break it down, subsector by subsector, and look at their peculiar challenges, And the question about budget sometimes is quite a problematic issue to deal with. Yes, budget could go up, but then the allocation of the budget, the disbursement of the budget may not even come. What we see on paper, when the Minister for Finance normally reads the budget and says that so much has been allocated to the agricultural sector, that's a budget. But then the real allocation, the real disbursement, is it given? Then you move to the next stage. If the disbursement is given, who benefits from the disbursement? Okay. You need to break down it step by step to make sure that there's efficient and effective use of the resources.
How do you want the budget to be distributed? Is it fairly or equitable?
Well,
because surely the industries are not the same.
Well, because as a country today, we cannot feed ourselves. we are in serious food insecurity state. You know, and when you look at the figures, they may tend to paint a picture that we are even still doing better. It is not it. When you talk about food security, are you talking about what amount of your food stock is produced within and what amount of it is imported? So imports and then local production make up the food stock.
Right.
Okay. Now, why you need to know which one contributes more has implications for accessibility and then nutritional value and then control.
Okay.
If it is locally produced, then you can guarantee that the very people who are producing it, they will have access to the food. If it's imported, it now becomes a market-based product. So you can only access that food when you have money. But if it is produced within, there are many people who will not necessarily need much money to be able to access it because it is produced within their backyards or their neighbors have produced so they can share that food and they too can even produce and keep some. But if it is much of your food stock, it comes from imports, then you must have incomes. And then when you see that in this country, our unemployment situation is terrible. Even those who have employment, what they take home is terrible. So you can see that the revenue, the ability to access imported food becomes limited.
Okay. Nana Wade, so you raised an issue with the Ministry of Agriculture. If you were a genie right now, what would you rather have the Ministry of Agriculture do differently?
Well, the ministry has caused financial loss to the state, which I think the new government coming have to make sure that on the 7th January, on the 8th January, what the president have to do is to make sure that Yoko pick up all these people from the ministry for them to render account. If Burkina Faso have been able to put up $12 million just to put up a tomato processing factory, and then we have our ministry here just build an empty house or empty structure, call it a warehouse and spend $70 million, I think there's something wrong somewhere. And we don't even have water just to, we're in a drying season. Farmers
provision of irrigation.
Exactly. Farmers need irrigation and we are not having that. Look at a lot of billions of dollars that this government have passed through this government. And we, the farmers, are not seeing it. When my brother was talking, he mentioned of this, how do you call it, the budget. When they raise the budget, where does the money goes? It gets into the ministry. It doesn't come to the coffers of the farmers. But when you talk about this Ministry of Food and Agriculture, Ministry of Sports and the GFA, when GFA, Ministry of Sports, reach the budget for the sports industry, it gets into the GFA. They get it. It is not Ministry of Sports that organizes the league. It is the GFA that organizes the league. So how come Ministry of Food and Agriculture has hijacked with the farmers, with the FU, our job? It is very bad and it's unfair. That is why the structures is coming down and will continue to collapse. As I'm speaking to you, Ghana, we are in a state of emergency. There's nothing is working.
Okay, you also mentioned that because we're importing everything. Let me go on Zoom where Dr. Otokuno, who speaks for the NDC on the agriculture sector, has joined us. Doc, you have heard all the concerns and you've seen the picture that's been painted. Do you agree at all to the picture that's been painted about the agri sector?
Well, they couldn't have said it any better. My colleagues have laid down the facts. Perhaps if there is time, there are even more that we would need to add. And it is important to underscore the point that as a people, where our food systems have completely shifted, now our food systems really rely on rice as the main source of carbohydrates. And as you may be aware, we are consuming somewhat about 1.5 million metric tons of rice every year, of which we are spending $560 million, which is close to about 9.6 or 9 billion Ghana cedi every year, importing rice to augment what we produce. We are producing somewhere around 600,000 metric tons. Unlike the time we left power in 2016, where out of our conscious policy to focus on investment in rice, we were able to cut down rice importation by 50%. We have retrogressed significantly and we are importing most part of the rice. That means that government needs to do more. But let's put all this agriculture thing into a broader perspective. When we talk about agriculture, we are looking at 5 strong areas of importance for economic growth. We are looking at the food crops, we are looking at the cash crops, we are looking at livestock, we are looking at fisheries, and we are also looking at agroforestry. All these areas are very key and essential, and most importantly, interconnected, because the livestock and fisheries sector depends on the thriving food crop sector. Then the cash crop sector also depends on the agroforestry, and it is interconnected. And so your policy should be an integrated agriculture policy that links the performance of production to processing to every aspect of the value chain. And the agriculture value chain, if we are spending time to break it down, is a very wide value chain. And so what government must do, or what the NDC government intends to do from the vision of President Mahama, is to use agriculture as the driver for our economy. Because if you look at the challenges we are having with inflation, it boils down to agriculture. You look at the challenges we have with interest rate, it brings it back to agriculture. You talk about exchange rate, it brings it back to agriculture. And so President Mahama is saying that he wants to launch a program called Agriculture for Economic Transformation Program, which Agriculture for Economic Transformation Program would have its programs heralded by the Feeding the Ghana program. Under the Feeding the Ghana program, we have the Transformational Grain Development Program, we have the Vegetables Development Program, we have the Livestock Development Program, we have the Poultry Farm to the Table program, and we have the agro-processing zones, which would be a very key element of President Mahama's policy. President Mahama has said that agriculture should only focus on the rudimentary production of the outputs, but most importantly also an advanced processing value addition to the food. And so President Mahama, for example, just today has intimated that his government will not have only Ministry of Food and Agriculture, but will have business attached to it, so that the farmer will see agro production as not just any trade, any cultural thing, but something that is business, something that must yield returns for the farmer.
So, let me have your attention. If I can have your attention on all the 5 pillars that you have mentioned: food, cash crops, fishery, agro, and even the livestock. Among all of the policies that you have proposed or you're planning to implement, which one of them are you using to link all of the 5 together? And I also want to get a clear understanding on what is the difference between the Feed Ghana project and what we have currently, the Planting for Food and Jobs. What's really the difference?
Well, Planting for Food and Jobs, I don't know what really they wanted to do as it stands now. Beyond all the efforts we have put in place, I have never been able to access the PFJ1 policy document, neither have I been able to access the PFJ document, except the commentary I have heard about it. And the PFJ1, according to the commentary, is an input subsidy program. And according to the commentary, again, they said that the PFJ2 is an input credit, driven program. But most importantly, the Feeding the Ghana program brings together the age-old input subsidy program, which previously sought to give some handouts to the farmers, supply them with inputs and so on and so forth, and combine that with an input credit program. And so under the Feeding the Ghana program, we have what we call the farm services centers. These farm services centers are going to be one-stop shop for the farmer, where all the agro inputs, which has become the biggest headache of farmers, would be procured by government, heavily subsidized. When the farmer goes to procure these inputs and they don't have the money, they are given to them on credit. And so you are combining 2 critical elements of government policy, the agro input subsidy and the agro input credit, so that if the farmer does not have the money to buy even the heavily subsidized inputs, they would be able to get it on credit. And bear in mind, this program is targeted at food. And so the food is the output. And so you look at the food systems of your country and use that to design the program. And so there are some specific crops that have been targeted. For example, maize and soybean. I'm also a farmer, and one of our biggest challenges in Ghana now for the past 5 years has been access to soybeans. Soybeans has become very, very difficult to get. It has become the new gold for farmers. And, you know, any farmer who is into livestock cannot do any form of farming without soybean. And so soybean is one of the critical grains that has been selected under the Transformational Grains Development Program, maize, so that we are able to produce this food grains in surplus to be able to meet the local
because you have mentioned grains,
livestock farmers, and agro processing.
Because you have mentioned grains, you have my attention on the very rice processing that had existed over the years. Does the NDC government have any specific plans to implement anything at all that will benefit that sector?
We have a specific plan for Aveime and even beyond, because as I mentioned, grains, rice is one of the key grains that we are looking at building self-sufficiency. Because again, as I intimated earlier, we are spending 560 million US dollars, hard currency, on procuring rice for the country. And that is why I sometimes cringe and get very scared. When this dry spell came in and the government announced that they want to do an intervention for farmers, they wanted to secure some $500 million, which is around almost 9 billion Ghana cedi, to provide some food support for the farmers in those areas. And guess what? All this amount of money they were using to import rice from China and from Europe. Whilst we have rice farmers harvest their rice paddy and it's been left in the warehouses and they are getting wasted, and the government will not put a mobilization effort to buy the rice from these farmers. Some of them have harvested rice as far back as last season.
I will go around the table again, Doc. I'll go around the table again and come back to you.
If I may land on
and whilst you are landing, please land on a very important point that cut across on all of my guests here: budgetary allocation. So it seems to be allocated on paper, but the decentralization of the monies they are unable to get a hang on. And you heard that from all of the guests over here, so that we don't just hear that it's a policy that's being run by us, but they want to be able to hold you quite accountable. Dana Obuadia here also mentioned that the ministry by itself is running things, running it as a business. Do you have any other plan? That's how I want you to land on these 2 points for us.
Very well, thank you very much. So, but just before I do that, let me quickly indicate that as part of our efforts to sit down the importation of rice and make Ghana one of the countries in the sub-region that is rice sufficient in terms of our production, President Mahama, as part of our program, has decided to bring out the cottage processing rice mills, where we have the small-scale rice mills that will be sent to the rice producing areas, so that the rice farmers, when they harvest, they can move it to this mini rice mills and get their rice milled for them. They have combined harvesters as part of the farm services centers to also harvest the rice for them when it is due, so that they don't get it wasted, because the rice, when it's due for harvesting and you don't harvest at a particular point in time, you start losing your crops and all that. And so we believe this will help us to become rice self-sufficient, or if you want, grain self-sufficient. And having said that, that brings me to the budget. I saw an analysis that your colleague did some few minutes before we came on, and he was making the point that the MPP government have increased the budgetary allocation to 3 billion Ghana cedi, and when John Mahama was leaving, it was some 501.5 million Ghana cedi. Indeed, it is true, but when you are doing the analysis of who has contributed more or has allocated enough for agriculture production, you would have to redenominate it into the forex, the USD currency. Then you'll be able to see whether indeed that increment has been done. Otherwise, you'll be making a defective analogy. And when you do that, you realize that under John Mahama or under the NDC government in 8 years, we increased the budgetary allocation to agriculture by some 82%, whilst our friends have done only 42%. Because mostly the government expenditure in agriculture is done in US
Doc, I want to take some reactions. Doc, I want to take some reactions in the studio.
If you don't discount it in US dollars, you're making a wrong analogy. But just to answer your question,
I will come back to you. I'll come back to you, because the challenge that my guest here is saying is really not the allocation. It is who receives the allocated money. But maybe this will be extended at some point, but nobody. So he's mentioning that the NDC will not do anything, they will not do business as usual, they'll do differently. What are your specific recommendations, how you want the ministry to run agriculture this time around?
Yeah, well, during NDC time, this letter is on the 15th February 1993. that the Ministry of Food and Agriculture wrote that they have a new FBO that is called Ghana National Association of Farmers and Fishermen. And then they have the mandate. They are supposed to hold all farmers and fishermen in this country.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, the ministry, they are policy makers. They have no business to do so far as agric is concerned. But this is the case that every money that comes gets into them. It doesn't come to the FBO.
So this association created,
this association
is supposed to be...
It is the embodiment of all, apex body of all farmers and fishermen in this country. It is a constitutionally mandated organization. But as I'm speaking to you, this government is not dealing with this organization.
What do you want done now, currently?
What we want to do is, it is something that has been established already. It is there already. What we want the new government to do is to deal with the FBOs, but not to deal with individual farmers.
Okay.
When you are being appointed as a minister, you are a political figure.
Right.
You are not supposed to do what this government they try to do. And the problem is, the problem now we have is the chief directors. Because the chief directors now has become devil on the shoulders of we the farmers. All because the chief directors know the right thing that they are supposed to do, but they are being manipulated by the politicians.
Okay.
Because how come a whole chief director, you are there and you allow
these are allegations.
It's not allegation, it is true.
Do you have evidence?
I have an evidence. How can you sit down, a chief director, sit down for the ministry to set up a $70 million empty house for a warehouse? While the Burkina Faso are doing 12 million just to build a tomato processing factory. So what we are saying is, when this new government comes,
they should deal with the association.
With the association.
Okay. Mr. Karowe, you also heard Dr. Otokuno and many of the policies that they're going to be implementing. Quickly, what do you agree with him and your final submission to this government?
Well, I think that we cannot, as for the policy framework, it looks good. And we will go beyond the policy framework and look at the outcomes. You know, the Ministry for Agriculture, as my colleague farmer is talking about, needs to be restructured. As it stands now, the ministry head is at one end, then the legs are somewhere. For instance, the ministry does not control agriculture on the ground. On the ground, at the district level, the agric officers are under the local government, and that is the MCA.
Right.
You see, so two ministries, one is at the top and one is at the bottom.
Okay.
So it leads to a lack of...
Even when it is decentralized, it is still decentralized to the same body.
No, it's a wrong decentralization.
Okay.
And that needs to be restructured by the new government. They need to do that. Okay,
Doc is hearing you. Now I'll go back to my friends on Zoom, Fred and Michael. So let me come to you, Fred. You heard what Doc mentioned about the rice industry. Please give me your final submission, and then I'll also go to Michael quickly to also give me his final submission. There must be some excitement about the solution proposed about soybeans. I'll come to you, Fred, first.
Right. Thank you so much. Yes. So I think a lot has been said, and I think that if we look at the mandate that has been given to the incoming administration, that is really huge. And you could already see they can feel their shoulders. I mean, they are carrying the shoulders of this country on themselves, because majority of the electorate, voted for them. And so the expectation really is high. However, it has to be managed in a manner that will still give us some glimmer of hope as those of us who are actors in the value chain. So for me, in conclusion, I think there are 5 key things I would like to talk about. The first one has to do with, commercialization. I've read their strategy for the agricultural sector, which is good. We have seen, very good, nice, beautiful proposals like that. So but you agree with me that when it comes to agricultural sector, as seen in the developed countries, commercialization drives formal markets, meaning that these strategies and proposals that the incoming administration have proposed to us, they ought to put in place measures to promote commercialization of agriculture.
Okay.
All right. But that is not to also mean that we should let go the smallholder unit. They are equally important. Now we see smart, young, educated, people who are actually into the production. So they need to have a balance in how to, manage that to promote commercialization across the sector. And that will mean that they have to safeguard or have what we call agricultural land banks. Okay. These land banks must be also giving certain special caveats for young people to access these land banks so that we can get the next generation of farmers to go into agriculture. Because if you are campaigning for young people to go into agriculture and they are struggling with access to land, access to market, access
let me
to
spare the last minute at least for Michael to also share his final conclusion. I know that agriculture is just so wide that I'm unable to exhaust. I'm unable to exhaust all the.
But just the last one, please.
Okay.
Maybe.
Please be quick with it.
Right. Just the last one, maybe. Just to also suggest from the PFJ 1 and 2, the way it's being modeled, it's also still problematic. That one size fits all will not work. So now you have different segments of the sector. Okay. Hello, am I still on air? You have different segments of the sector.
Yeah.
So maybe allocation should be done. Allocation should be done according to the different segments of the sector. In other words, those who are small units, those who are medium scale producers, those who are commercial scale producers. So if you're allocating, say, inputs, i.e. fertilizers, agrochemicals, and what have you, we should allocate it according to the segment.
I think we should set up a meeting with you with Dr. Otokuno. Yeah, I think we should set up a meeting. I don't know if I still have Michael, but Michael, you have 30 seconds to just share your final submissions.
Fine. Let me just say that for poultry, I would suggest that we look at the cold chain. I mean, people are ready to put in money, their own money, and get their things done. But where to slaughter, where to keep them, and where to market them, these are chains that must be put together. Once these chains are put together, then the production will come up. Because are
you excited about the Kokon Kitten policy?
I've heard about it, but you see, for me, I always policies are nice, but it is the implementation of the policy that I talk about. So I'm ready to give them about 3 months to see what they put in place, because new people are come into the ministry and all of that. So 3 months, let's see what they put in place, and then we'll start talking about it. But generally, they must look at if the maize and soya, once that is tackled, and then the marketing of the beds, which is the cold, the slaughtering, a cold chain, and the cold room, and then the marketing. Once we are able to do that, then I'm sure that something will come out of the policy.
I'm sure after 3 months, as you have said, you give them, it's a fair deal. But Doc, please, final words in 30 seconds. Let me just give you 30 seconds to give some assurances.
So I couldn't have agreed more with Mike and Fred and Edward. And then I mean, the points that he made is very, very important. At the heart of the survival or the success of any agriculture policy is the farmer-based organizations that you deal with. And so as part of this, President Mahama has mentioned that one of the first things that he would do would be to pass the cooperative bills for farmers, which will empower the farmers in their cooperatives so that we can deal with them in terms of policy implementation. And indeed, as he said, NAF, Ghana National Association of Farmers and Fishermen, was one of the prime organizations that helped President Rawlings to run efficiently the agriculture sector. And our friends in the MPP abandoned them. When we came back, we tried to revive them, but again, they have virtually collapsed them. We believe that this cooperatives bill will allow all the various agriculture workers unions and the various farmer-based organizations to be empowered so that all these policies that we are bringing out would be efficient in this implementation. Because if you deal with these cooperatives, you are able to eliminate the biggest problem of moral hazards and adverse selection. And we believe that would be very, very key. Then finally, on commercialization. Commercialization must be looked at comprehensively, not only at the production level, but it must also be looked at along the value chain.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you so much. I promise we'll bring Doc back into the studio so that we'll have a comprehensive conversation. But gentlemen, you're very kind for your time. Thank you. Mighty generous of you. We'll go for a quick break. When we come back, the show continues. Come back to the polls. Well, if you followed our election coverage, you may have noticed our unique world-class election software on our smart wall. It had the ability to aid precision analysis, and this year, we could even drill down in the elections to the poverty and Galamsey heat maps. Well, as we speak, there are 9 constituencies still in dispute, including Dom Kabinya. The data helped us to make sense of the contest in these constituencies based on the trends and historical numbers. The man behind that software joins me in studio. Welcome, Tony Intiado. Tony, welcome.
Thank you.
And that was just, imagine, like when I see Evans, Raymond, and Winston by that's the smart wall, it just gives me a lot of goosebumps, and it was a great work done. Thank you for giving us such an amazing software. But tell me, how did the magic behind all the software happen? Just pure data?
Yes, life is all about data. And for us as a company, the work we do leverages primarily on data. And so over the years, having worked with multimedia and other media houses in the past, we built a history of looking at results by results. And we need to drill much more deeper. You could actually even take the results to polling station level, but sometimes for clumsy. So, but generally, the entire application is map-based or location-driven.
Okay.
So, and once it's location, we can add any level of parameter or theme to the subject matter. So it's not just the polling station or electoral area or constituency. Everything that has to do with location can be added to it.
So how did you come by this excellent idea of adding the poverty and Galamsey heat to the map?
Yeah, like I've said, these are all contextual, can be drilled down to districts, constituency, or regional basis. So poverty, Galamsey, water distribution, land administration, school development. These are all can be grouped on that basis. But for this election, for the ones we could easily get data to, grateful to Ghana Statistical Service for the work they did on the poverty in 2015 and that of the recent census 2021. That became very available. But if there was one even in this year, we would have even used it. So as long as any data can be grouped on either district or constituency or regional basis, we could have easily even add up to that.
It would be the nice time to actually mark my bosses. How do you assess how we used the software in the smart wall?
And this year, I think multimedia was very impressive. I was just tracking across various media houses, different approach to smart walls, some using different technologies. But the ease and the flow of the application as used by multimedia was very impressive. I mean, I think on the eve to the election and thereafter, virtually Raymond and Evans were sleeping on the thematic and the election data. Yeah. And it made a lot of sense because, again, every election comes back to economy.
Yeah.
So once you understand what affects people's pockets, it should give you a clue where the election is likely to end up.
There were two predominant colors on our smart wall, green and blue, very predominant. In many, there were other colors anyway, but these two were the very predominant ones. How did you decide to want to incorporate that? How did that idea come up?
So those colors, what we had to do was to pick out.
I can demonstrate
that.
You can demonstrate, yes.
So yeah. So what we decided to do was to try to represent the for the various parties. Okay, various political parties. They give them a color, but look at their logo generally. So there's blue in MPP, the color combination.
Okay.
I think blue, red, and white. And NDC had a number of colors, green, black, I think white in it or so. So we looked at those colors that will not conflict. In some other cases, you have NDP, GFP with other colors. So we had to adopt one that can flow through and also allocate colors even to independent. So even in historical elections where you had independent winning, we could easily demonstrate, for example, the essence of that independent person winning. So then what it does, that it gives you an idea of, see, for example, color red.
Oh, yes.
It would have belonged to maybe PNC or some other color. So we adopted a color code for every party to make up a sense.
So Joe Brace almost wanted to sleep here as well. Each time it was his turn and he was on duty, he loved the colors. And this is where we coined the term Ghana's turned green, or we flipped from blue to green, and it was just amazing. And so beyond elections, what's this application good for?
There's much more that the technology behind it, and the technology is what is called geographic information systems. So for us, once you deploy geography, and the whole term is coming from geography. I said, geography is location.
Right.
And if you understand the principle of geography, 85% of human endeavor is around geography. So whether it's infrastructure, agriculture, as you have just done, health, infrastructure, school management, these are all geographical elements. And if you want to compare two countries, it's about comparing geography. So one is nicer, one is not, it's geography. One is cleaner, one is not, geography. So the entire technology is geographical driven. So once we have data, we can be able to stimulate how Ghana can look like in the next 50 years.
Interesting.
So on that premise, for election purposes, that's what we did. But the application works across the myriad of challenges we have as a country. Land administration, agric, and I'm even to add to the previous discussion, precision agric is GIS. So in countries that have only 4 months of cultivation for the whole year, we are blessed to have almost 9 months. We have only few periods in the year where we cannot cultivate. But countries have 8 months of snow, dry, you can't do anything. They have only 4 months. Yet they're able to produce food and then send to us. How come? It's because every single square piece of land in that country, they know what crop can do well. Precision agric. So once they don't waste time. So it's not everywhere you can now want to explore to grow. Then it works. So that technology is what is driving this very application.
I think people shouldn't do boring presentations. If you want to do in Kecha like my boss Evans, this is the software you should be looking forward to. But beyond the software, beyond this application, I'd like to know more about your organization.
So as a company, even before the app itself, we did 2 series maps, and I like the team to switch the map. What we did was that we had one on Galamsey.
Okay.
So in the Galamsey one, what you saw on the election day is by virtue of the constituency. But in more specific terms, we turn the Galamsey map in this particular, what we call a story map. So if what it does is that I can cruise through the entire map, give you an idea, and most importantly, when I get to the various Galamsey towns, there's a picture that goes with it, and it pushes to give you an idea where that exact Galamsey is located. So you find them numbered.
Okay.
Okay.
And the numberings are for what?
The numbers are actually pictures. They're supposed to be pictures as I see on the screen.
Okay.
So for every single one, it tells you exactly. So then Galamsey is not a textbook issue. It's a location issue. So if you want to be able to fix anything that's environmental, it's GIS. You can't do anything about it. So we put together the entire, what do you call it, deck from Erastus's work. Then we've done also comparative, roughly satellite imagery. So every single one tells you a corresponding map where that specific incident can be found.
Interesting.
So if, for example, by name, this is Achimfo. If I switch to map 3, the map recenters to give me exactly where this incident can be found.
Wow.
So that is the power of the technology.
I mean, we can't then now say that we can't solve this Galamsey issue. Any government that is determined and very committed, if they called Tony to help them, I'm sure they will. But please tell us more about your organization, because I want the incoming government to know about your organization and at least get you to help in the fight against Galamsey.
Yeah, thank you very much. So my company, we've done some good stuff. It's not just on the GIS stuff. We are very strong in ERP development. So it may be of interest to know that we are one of the companies that facilitated the automation of the judiciary. Okay. So we built systems for case management called investigative case management. Okay. So even for birth and death registry, we were involved in some part of the automation effort. So as a company, our core bread and butter is technology. And the technology are very specific. ERP and geotechnology, we fuse them. So just to give you an idea roughly, name any industry in Ghana, and I can tell you from 1 to 10 how much they need any of this technology. So typically, the foreign companies in Ghana all run 1 or 2 of these technologies. The oil and gas companies. You cannot do oil and gas without GIS. You can't. You cannot do oil and gas without a very strong ERP, which we sell. So that is the kind of service we render.
Just to be sure, the ERP, tell me.
The ERP is Enterprise Resource Planning System.
Okay.
There are many.
Okay.
We sell the world's leading ERP.
All right. All right. But where are you located? How can anybody watching you contact you and all?
We are in East Legon on the Nisai Wulu Road, number 35. So we are adjacent. We are not far from the Mangoes restaurant, also in the same direction with A8 Hotel. So in that, once you're on that lane, you would easily find our office.
Plus, Tony is such a nice person. When he was taking us through the training, all he needs is just a can of malt, and then he can just teach you with the details. Thank you so much, Tony.
Thank you very much.
We've learned a thing. Thank you. But I think you have another thing too.
Yes, there was another. I wanted to show you. That was a comparative map of the performance of NDC and NPP.
All right.
Between two election years. So again, that is the power of the GIS application. So what it does is, I'm able to compare on constituency basis, and this was done for 2016-2020 election. So if you want to find how well your party did, when I swipe the bar to the right, what you are seeing is 2016 election results. When I swipe entire bar to the left, this is 2020. So we can actually also do something same for 2020 and then 2024.
Okay.
So it tells you which constituency you won in 2020 and which you lost in 2016. So for example, look at this side of Ghana.
Yes.
Then as I switch, because I've pressed, as I switch over,
the color is changing.
So it tells you if you want to do better in your election strategy. It just tells you why did you lose this particular area? And then once you have the correct answers, you don't just take the same monotonous message to all constituencies. The message ought to be tailored, because what affected one constituency may not be the same that does the other. So then your message is tailored. Then you know exactly what to do to win what constituency. So I have series of such maps. One of them, for example, also, which is an image, was in 2012, the case that went to court.
Yes.
My office actually produced complete set of maps. When there was even disputes in the court number of police stations involved, we could easily tell the total number. When it was finally resolved, it aligned with our data. So data is everything. So again, in that number of 2012 court case, you had the incidence of, let's say, overvotes. So there were two different classifications of overvotes. One as made by the current Vice President Baumia. The other one is a classical overvote, where number of ballots exceeding total number of registered voters. So again, in that particular one, if I could have the image, you see we counted about 11 polling stations, because at 2012, we were privy to have mapping of polling stations done in Ghana. 2020, 2024, that data EC did not do it. So once you had polling stations, you're able to now narrow down what is the result for that polling station, and then zero that polling station specifically on the map. So what it does is, yes, thank you very much. So what it does is, you find the actual polling stations, and by analysis, we're able to tell the number of votes. They are by 11.
Okay.
This was in 2012. So we find this red one, this was happened to be somewhere in as a Mankesi.
So the PS code, you mean the polling station code?
Exactly. So once EC makes that level of data available,
right,
there's so much that can be done for analyzing why Ghanaians act the way they do. It's all about data.
Can we travel into 2028?
Can
you and I take a trip into 2028? Or it's too early?
It's too early to do that. But those are possibilities. So first and foremost, it's all about data. But this effort of mapping police stations ought to be an EC should be interested to want to have a map of all police stations.
So for example, in 2028, what are some of the services that a political party can, take from you to be able to project into 2028?
So
at least they want to be informed.
If you want to be like very informed, so one of the things that for us, we believe that every single police station, because it's a geography issue,
yes,
ought to be mapped. Now, I give a typical example. In 2012, there were a certain number of constituencies that were known as unknown constituencies. Unknown police stations. Okay? Unknown police stations. There's no police station that's not known. So if it's unknown, then it's on paper, it hasn't got any ground reference. So if you map it, then if there are any police stations that are not known, you will know.
Yes.
Because there cannot be unknown police stations.
Yes.
But these are mounted on the surface of the earth, latitude and longitude. So it cannot be unknown.
Yes.
So that gives us an idea. At that election, there were about 29,000 polling stations, for example. So all of that is available. So if I switch to let's say the next image, you will see it gives the complete view of one of the classical cases. And that tells you the so this is the Baume's classical definition of overvoting. What I show you is the actual textbook.
Okay.
Vote being more than registered voters. But this one was number of pages torn being more than how much was given.
And I like the color you have used because it looks like that Ghana was bleeding.
So at that point, in that particular election, we represented red for NDC. And then blue for NPP. So again, similar like I showed you, same thing. So and then the polling stations are what you find below on the green dot.
All right.
Okay, so then the other next map gives you almost like the total, that particular issue had police stations all across the country. So these are duplicated serial numbers in that particular case, for example. And every small green dot you find is the actual location of the police station.
Interesting.
So the reality is that as we get advanced as a country, it will get to a point media houses would want to be collating results directly from polling stations.
Yeah.
Now, in this election, I don't know about the other parties, but I can say without a doubt, NDC and MPP, by the technology they use, they get the aggregation of their result directly from polling stations and not constituency.
Okay.
The reason why they're able to tell you we have won 2 hours, 3 hours. So, and it's coming from polling stations.
Right.
So if any media house say want to take it to that level, by virtue of 2-3 hours, if it all comes in, you have an idea of the polling stations. Now, the other benefit also looking into long term is that incidences happen around polling stations, not constituency level. So then you can actually now disaggregate on the map locations of police stations that have incidents. So we could have given you, let's say, red dots. This police station had a fight. This one had a theft. This one had this particular, someone ran away with the ballot box, all by polling stations. So that's the power of the technology.
This is just so beautiful. I just know that people will just be drooling about our smart world right now. And again, I can't wait to just direct people to how they'll find you. You're located inside East Legon.
Legon, Nisai Ulu Road, number 35.
So tell me, when should we start collating to be able to project it to 2028? How much data do you need?
Well, with what we have done for 2024, building on to 2028 is all a parameter of when, let's say, notice of poll is available, knowing the candidates that are available. Once those things are out, this time around again, it came in very quite late. There was pressure for those of us doing data work.
Right.
But we wish that EC can work on that calendar. By a certain time, say June, July, all of this is done and dusted. Then you have time to put your data together, build a very solid application, because then there could be other stations who may not have been lucky like us, but who could have, if there was time, they would have built 1 or 2 applications that are similar. The reality is that we need to take Ghana to the next level together. One hand media, one hand technology company like us, the other hand the government agencies, i.e. EC, and all of them.
Well, I'd like to say thank you, but I want you to share your final words with people as you say bye to us today.
Well, I think that for the elections, minute past election, what is very clear to us is that comparing multimedia's work as against the others, by way of the wall, there's no doubt which one is visibly aesthetic, that appeals to heart and soul.
Yes.
And that is what we do. And we want to encourage Ghana at large, for this new government, that there's more we can do using geotechnology. And if anything at all, the future is geotechnology.
And this is what technology does, because it really got the job done very quick and snappy. And they said, oh, this time multimedia really finished really quick and snappy. And it was Tony. Thank you so much, Tony.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's it for Pulse today. Thank you for watching. And there's more news if you log on to myjoyonline.com.